de-aeration system is a name that I guess we really threw at it, but that's really what it is take the air out of the system. And the first time I got involved with this was back in the late 1970s, and I had a customer in the been in the radiator business pretty much my whole life that came in, and he was converting John Deere tractors and taking out the original motor and putting in an interstate diesel with about 50% more horsepower. And he didn't have a lot of room, and you needed to do it with the same radiator. And this guy was extremely smart. But anyway, most of the semis run a de-aeration system. If you think of a passenger car, you've got your pressure cap that goes into a surge tank, and that's really a surge tank for overflow to go back into. When it cools off, it will suck the water back in the system. It doesn't de-aerate the system during the time the car is running. The de-aeration system, if you look at a semi-radiator, if any of you are around semi-heavy equipment, they'll fill the radiator up in the top, but there'll always be usually a 1-inch hose line going down into the block. And if you took the radiator apart, you'd find the top section is where the 1-inch neck is. So when you pour water in, it goes through that 1-inch hole, not the big hose, and it goes to the bottom of the block and fills the system from the bottom up. And that's one of the important things, is to fill it from the bottom up. And then when it comes up and gets up into the top of that tank, there's just a little, what we call pee-hole, that it go up, and it would allow the air to go up through there. So when you fill it, you have a better chance of filling it and getting the air out. That's part of the process. So in this particular case, what we have here is what we call the surge tank. And you fill the surge tank, you take the radiator cap off of the radiator, and we are trying to develop a piece to put on the radiator cap rather than having to cut it off and weld on a pipe plug to put a fitting in. So we hope to have that done so you can just take your regular radiator. But you fill the water in through here, it comes down in here and goes into the water pump. And then it's filling the block up and coming back through the bottom hose and then bringing it up. The water comes out of here, and eventually it'll get filled all the way up. But the real key is this part right here. This needs to be the highest point on the system where you fill it. So if you got to modify it, it's a little tough to get this high enough. Some guys are taking it back into the deck a little bit and putting a flip lid. A lot of guys are putting an oil cooler back there or a power steering pump. That's a pretty good idea to get it a little bit higher. This has to be the second highest point, and this has to be higher than this point right here. So you want this to be the highest point in the whole system. Normally you can get by with about a 1-inch neck here, depending on the car and what you have. But you want a thermostat. We make a new block one that's designed for this, where you can flip it and go either way, dual pass, single pass, or you can get GM thermostat housings that have the pipe plugs in them. And one of them we use for this. So when I fill it up, you'll take this cap off, and this one's on tight, but you fill it up until water comes out here. And when you're pouring in here, and you get it up, and you'll see it start to come out, and most of the time, especially on a brand new fill where you're not just topping off, you'll see it come up and you'll see a bubble, and a lot of guys will just screw it down, tighten it up. Okay, it's full. You want to let that run till you don't see any more bubbles come out. Sometimes it might last 1 or 2 seconds, and sometimes it might take 10 seconds for all the bubbles to stop coming out of that. And a lot of you guys or today, most guys are pouring in through the radiator, and you're filling it up, and you're going through here, but you have no place for the air to go. So it's real easy to get a vapor lock somewhere in the system. And it's amazing how air can trap itself in a system that's sealed. And it really does do that. But so that's the important thing. And you get it out here and you let it bleed through here and run out. Then when you start the car up, what you're going to see is you want to fill it up to about 2 inches below this little piece that's going to the top of the radiator. So let it be filled to about right here. And then when you start it up, and I've talked to a lot of guys when I've helped them put the system on, okay, you think it's full? Is this the fullest you've ever had your car? You got this air up here, you feel like you've got all the air out of it. You'll start it up, and I'll guarantee you the first time you'll lose that entire can. And all that is that much air. So there's about a pint of air in the system. I've seen a lot of guys, take the radiator hose off, hold it up in the air high, pour water in it, try and get all the air out that way. You'll see some guys will pull their car part way on the trailer, filling their radiator, trying to get it to be the highest point. A lot of different things done, and they help. but they're not as foolproof as this. And what this, it's a great way to fill it. And when you start it up, it gets the air out. But what the main thing it does, it keeps the air out as you're running. And that's what nothing else does. When you're running it, you'll watch and you'll see the water come flowing through this hose, and you look down the can and it's flying through there pretty fast. And you'll see that if you keep your water level down here, all the air can stay up in the can. And then it'll go out the radiator cap, through your regular radiator cap as it bleeds off for your pressure. So what you're doing is you're keeping the air out of the system the entire time you're running it. And when I first started racing, I raced over at Hawkeye Downs and put a system on right off the bat. And I don't think I probably ever in 5 years of racing got over 190. And when it was cold out, I had to put a thermostat in. You absolutely could not get it hot enough right off the bat. You just couldn't do it. So you can have all the greatest components in the world, and they've talked about a lot of great things. Fan shroud, blade distance is very important. Keeping the radiator clean is important. But all those things together, if you have a lot of air in your system, you can have a problem. Now, it may not take you to 260, but it's the difference between being 190 and maybe 210. All the guys that I helped put this on with in the last year or two have immediately seen a 15% or a 15-degree drop in their cooling pretty much the first time out. And like I said, the main thing is getting the air out when you fill it and keeping it out when it runs, because it will generate air as it goes. And you can visualize if we had this closed off and all we have here is a cap, you really don't have any place for the air to go. It can go out the pressure of the cap releasing, but here you've got an area in the tank where the air goes. So it's important to keep this down into here, and then you can keep the air going. But like I said, when you first start it up, you'll be surprised that how much of that disappears, and that just tells you how much air is in the system. Very easy to put on. Take this and put it in the top of the water pump is the ideal place, and put this on the highest point of the radiator. On a couple of them, there's a nipple that's right here, and that's okay to hook your line into. We have a radiator that we do sell now with, I think they put an N behind it, if I'm not mistaken, in the system. Dual pass, I'm in favor of a dual pass in most applications. The more passes you go, the more air you're going to get. And what I saw with a lot of guys in the stock car putting in the new 31-inch triple pass is going to just give you 3 times as much air. It's a great system. It's not going to make a bad system. If you got a bad water pump, it's not going to cure that. But whatever system you have, in my opinion, this will normally give you 10 to 15 degrees cooler running all the time. And if you're on alcohol, you may not see a big difference. The guys that are running mods with alcohol, well, I don't have a problem, and a lot of them don't. And the first one here that we put it on was Randy's, and he was kind of apprehensive to do it, so I just went over and did it without him caring, and hooked it up. He started it up and ran it, and he just said, I can't believe it. And you virtually at the track never ever have to take the cap off. And because the air just stays out of the system, it doesn't suck back in. If you took the cap off, the water is going to be right where it was when you started. And if you do have a heating problem or something, you can just crack this a little bit, let pressure relief, and then take the cap off right away. Even if your motor got to 260 or something, you'd be surprised how quickly you can get in and fill it back up. So if I race on Friday night, and I start on Tuesday working on my car, and I go to take the cap off just to check it, there's still pressure in it 4 or 5 days later. That's one of the things Randy commented about that he noticed right off the bat. He says, I can't believe it. I didn't work on the car for 3 days, and I popped it up and it still had pressure in it. So it just makes the system much more solid and keeps the air in the place where it belongs.